Hello, everybody. Today, I'd like to talk a little bit about Noah versus Noah. And what I mean by that is, I would like to compare the biblical Noah, as we all know him, and his ark, with our current National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and to see if there's any similarities or why I feel the acronym was meant to reflect the biblical Noah um, in speech. So, let's investigate. As everyone knows, Noah is very important in the Abrahamic religions. He was the 10th and last of the pre flood patriarchs. His story is contained in the Hebrew Bible in the book of Genesis, chapters 5 through 9. The Genesis flood narrative is among the best known stories in the Bible. It really is. Noah is also portrayed as the first tiller of the soil and the inventor of wine. According to the Genesis account, Noah labored faithfully to build the ark at God's command, ultimately saving not only his own family, but mankind itself and all land animals from extinction during the flood. Afterwards, God made a covenant with him and promised never again to destroy all the earth's creatures. The flood narrative is followed by the story of the curse of Ham. Okay, so that's basically the generality of the broad scope of the story. If you want to get the details, go ahead and pick you up a Bible, pick you up, a Hebrew Bible or a book of Genesis. So many people have this misconception that Noah was the original and the only um, tale that we have that speaks of floods and saving animals and creationism of the world, and that's a shame that we weren't educated a little better. But there's so many other cultures that share this belief. It's a common belief, probably because it's fact. It has happened many times on this planet, and it will happen again. So we've got many African cultures, and they pass down this tradition orally. And some of these people include the Kwaya, the Mambudi, Maasai, Mandin, and the Yoruba peoples. And what I like about the African cultures is they were traditionally separated from what we would think of as the Abrahamic culture. So there really shouldn't be any bleed through in tradition. These are completely unique to them. And then let's go into North America. You know, everyone says that no white man, no nothing, just some indigenous people were here in North America prior to uh, Cristobal Colon, which we're going to do another series on that. Did he really exist? The name actually means Christian colonization. So I have my doubts as to if he was a real man. Anyway, in North America, we got the Hopi mythology that has this great flood myth that if you've been anywhere around Native Americans and their tribes and these powwows, these things are entrenched. Okay, they know it. The Wasnik peoples, the Kamaks people, the Anishinaabe, which my wife is a part of that tribe, the Inuit, the Nisqually, the Eskimo. These are just the North American ones. Mesoamerican, well, here, there's so many of them, it's just listed as Mesoamerican flood myths. But you've got the Aztecs, the Toltecs, the Mayans, all of them had these flood myths. Now, more importantly, and I don't know why they skipped over the Mesoamerican ones, um, because they actually have their pyramids, and a lot of their constructions were built around the solar system, right? The skies, the astrology, and they predicted things. They knew when the summer solstice was, the winter solstice, and they also had the Aztec calendar that predicted the end of the world. Now everyone says, "Oh, well, that was off. It came and went." Well, check your math. It's off by 300 years only because when we switched to Anno Domini, we retrograded the years 300 years. In other words, we skipped years. In other words, we didn't start at year one. We started at year 300 and then just acted like, oh, those other 300 years are now our history, when actually they were part of the prior history. So we got South America. We got the Urkokuri, Urkokari, right? We got the Unupachukuti. We got the Legend of Trenton. We got Bochica. We got Sume. Asia's pretty interesting, right? I like looking at the Asian ones because that's where we get to the heart of what people think is where mankind came from, right? You got Samaria, and guess what? Sumerian even has a creation myth that involves the Great Deluge, the Great Flood. Mesopotamia, the Gilgamesh flood myth. Everyone's heard of Gilgamesh. It's one of the oldest stories, and of course, it's based on a flood myth. Now we've got the Abrahamic religions, and I think it's interesting that it's listed under the Asia part. People always act like white people are not Caucasians, Asians, Caucasians, and therefore we are all descendants of the same families. So you've got Noah's Ark, and then we also have the Islamic view of Noah. China with the the Great, Nuwa, and the Great Flood. India, Manu and Matsya, and Korea, Mok Doryong, Malaysia, Temuan, Orang Selatar, the Philippines, Igorot. Not only does the Igorot talk about it as the Great Deluge, but it's once upon a time when the world was flat and there were no mountains. There lived two brothers. So, they're going even back to the flat earth times, which a lot of peoples of those time believed in. We got the Tai Kadai people. And it's, Europeans, the classical antiquity of the ancient Greek flood myths. Medieval Europe, the Irish, Labor Gabala, Erin. Erin, as you see there at the end, is what Ireland is named after. Erin, Ireland. Welsh, Dwafan, Dwafak. Norse, Belgamir. And Finnish, which is the Finnish flood myth. And then we also have the Polynesian and the Hawaiian Islands. The Nu, the Ruatapu, and the Tahaki. Now, all of these myths span across the globe. And some of these places are very remote, very out there. So why do we all share this common folklore of a worldwide deluge that destroys the world, not just with floods, but tsunamis, earthquakes, volcanoes erupting? A total, devastation, a total power. And of course, most of these cultures think it's God, that they did something wrong. And when I use the word God, I'm using it loosely here. Everyone has their own God. So obviously the Aztecs, the Mayans, they were thinking they needed to sacrifice more hearts and blood to give to their God, right? And obviously the other cultures had their gods, but they all felt like they had to appease their gods. And obviously Noah didn't have to appease his God, but he was commanded by his God to do what he had to do. So I think this is actually a small list of flood myths. I think if we were to go into more detail into some of these areas, we would see in other areas that there's many more. And I've got to say, it can't be total coincidence that all of these locations around the globe, all of these cultures, all of these great societies have the same story, unless these things really did happen. Not only that, but they probably happen more frequently than what the powers that be would like us to know. And maybe these things that are happening are not because God wants to clean the earth off and start over and this, that, and the other, but maybe it's because the poles are shifting. And when the poles shift, well, you're going to get some serious, what. Now, if you look back at the ancient Egyptians, right, you got the pyramids of Giza, all astronomically aligned. Mexico has pyramids, all astronomically aligned. There's pyramids in Russia. There's pyramids underwater off of Japan. There's pyramids everywhere across the globe. Half of them haven't been discovered, and some of them are still buried. Who are these cultures? None of our history reflects that. As a matter of fact, none of our history reflects a lot of the things that are coming into sight since the invention of the internet and satellite photography. such as star forts. They're everywhere. What culture did that? Who was Tartaria? Why is Tartaria in the Encyclopedia Britannica and now they're just not even mentioned? Anyway, those are also topics for another discussion. Let's get back here. So my contention is this flood, this deluge, is a reoccurring event and one we may not want to overlook and take lightly. And if you notice, in almost all of these pictures, they're all associated with some sort of climate, some nasty storms happening. And then at the end, it's all resolved and everything goes back to peace and harmony. And there's rainbows in the sky and everything else. So, but if you had to cover up a plot so big, if you had to cover up something that would scare the bejesus out of every human on earth, but you still had to explain why we're having all these changes in climate, well, I guess you got to come up with a hoax like climate change. It seems to fit the narrative, doesn't it? So that brings us full circle back to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, and then look, it even says like NOAA, the biblical one, right there, is an American scientific agency within the United States Department of Commerce that focuses on the conditions of the oceans, major waterways, and the atmosphere. It warns of dangerous weather, it charts the seas, and it guides the use of protection of ocean and coastal resources. It conducts research to provide understanding and improve stewardship of the environment. NOAA was officially formed in 1970, and in 2017 had over 11,000 civilian employees. And they've got an annual budget of something like $6 billion, something ridiculous. And my contention is NOAA is our modern day version of the pyramids. The Aztecs could calculate when things were going to happen based on the solar system, and they used their pyramids to do it. The Egyptians, same thing. All of their pyramids were astronomically aligned, and they could tell when and foresee when these things were going to happen. The Vatican, if you look at the Vatican from a satellite photo, you will see it as an enormous time reading machine that's astronomically aligned to read the movements of the stars. It's right in our faces. Every person of real control and real power knows and studies the movements of the stars in relationship to our planet so that they can know when these things will happen. It's so precise, like we said earlier, the Aztecs created a calendar for it. And that calendar has been dead on the money. And the people that keep denying that it was off for the end of the world because it's 300 years off didn't take into account Anno Domini and recalculation of those years back in. So we may be more advanced with how we can monitor this, but I don't see any changes as far as, the elite are still in the know and the rest of us, the subjects, right, are kept in the dark. And they want to force this climate hoax on us to tax us for it. I mean, it's one thing if they're just going to say, hey, there's some climate, be careful. I got that. But they want to charge us money. They want to take away my hard-earned money to pay for something that we cannot stop. There is no human on the planet. There is nothing we can do. There is not anything we can do to stop the poles from shifting.